for our colleagues in Australia. I'd like to welcome you to the high-level political forum on sustainable developments and our online session on low-emission solutions in energy and beyond, partnering with businesses for sustainable recovery. My name is Andrei Baida. I'm a vice president with the Russian Development Bank, VEB, and head of ESG finance. And today we have an absolutely remarkable and stellar panel of speakers from member states, from private sector and academia from all around the world. And I do hope that we will have an extremely interesting session today. Before we start, I'd like to do a number of housekeeping announcements. First of all, I would ask only the speakers to have their cameras on during our session. It's for the sake of better connection for all of us. I would also strongly request all other participants to keep their cameras off and all of those who are not speaking at the moment to have their microphones off. Would really appreciate.
Recording in progress.
We'd really appreciate that in order not to cause any disturbance to our session. We encourage you to post your questions on the chat that's within the Zoom app. We'll pick several for to discuss with our speakers after the main part of the session. Yeah, assuming we have time for that. If you wish to receive any slides that any of our speakers might show, please do let us know. We'll make sure and arrange for you to get those slides. So this is one last thing here is that this is an open event, and feel free to quote the speakers, and we actually encourage you to do so on your social media, but we kindly ask you to be accurate on your quotations. So that will be all for the housekeeping announcements, and I think we're ready to start with the family photo. So once again, I'd ask all the speakers to keep their cameras on for the family photo. Great. I think we had that. So in order to kickstart our session, let's just quickly go through the questions that we'll be discussing today. There's a lot to discuss, frankly. We'll be talking about how can all low emission solutions be used to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, and while maintaining at the same time the nationally determined nature of the contributions. What experiences and practices can be shared to facilitate the scaling of low emission solutions to the economies that need them most. We'll talk about how we can transform and how transformations aimed at managing emissions foster sustainable growth and deliver job creation and upskilling. And we'd also obviously talk about how governments and businesses can partner in low emissions tech for sustainable recovery. Once again, I hope we're going to have a very interesting session. So in order to open the session, I would kindly ask our colleagues from the Russian Ministry of Economic Development to put on the opening remarks of His Excellency Minister Maxim Reshetnikov of the Ministry of Economic Development of Russia.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, I am glad to welcome you to the Russian side event at the 2021 UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. Thank you for being here today. This is my second HLPF. In 2020, on behalf of the Russian Federation, I presented our first voluntary national review outlining Russia's efforts and achievements on their sustainable development goals. Over the last year, the topic has only become more relevant. Today, we are all here to discuss the crucial issue of low-carbon development, and how we can pool efforts of the state and business for these purposes. Over the last year, Russia has made important steps. A presidential decree now limits greenhouse gas emission to less than 70% of the 1990 volumes by 2030. On the basis of this presidential decree and in line with the rules of the Paris Agreement, we submitted out first nationally determined contribution. A draft strategy for low carbon development until 2050 has been developed, and we have put forward a more ambitious scenario. The main climate law on limiting greenhouse gas emissions has been signed. It mandates carbon reporting for large emitters and enables climate project and carbon units circulation. All our countries are now actively preparing for the 26th UNFCCC Conference of Parties in November in Glasgow, and I would like our discussion today to focus on fundamentally important issue. When reducing greenhouse gas emission, we should not discriminate against any technologies that lead to real emissions reduction. In other words, we have to reduce emissions wherever it's most efficient and with all available tools recognized as such. In this respect, we see significant potential for nuclear and hydropower as energy sources with low greenhouse gas emissions. I'm sure that today you will talk in more detail about this. Working on new rules in global climate regulation, including when finalizing the rulebook for Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, we must ensure that the widest range of participants and projects have access to this mechanism. We share the need to reduce CO2 emissions, but we are confident that we must look for ways to do this in cost-effective manner and not harm economic well-being and development in this process. We invite member states and partners to share our view, and we will be glad to receive your support across all platforms. We are always open for discussion, and today we will be happy to hear opinions on the climate agenda from invited countries, representatives of international organizations, as well as the private sector. I wish you a fruitful discussion and reaffirm that we are always open for cooperation.
Great. I think there was a great speech by Minister Reshetnikov. I would like to specifically point out that we've been working very closely with the Ministry of Economic Development, and Minister Reshetnikov has been the locomotive for sustainability agenda in Russia. He recently introduced the national Russian green taxonomy that is supposed to be put into effect rather soon, which is very similar to the most advanced taxonomies out there in the world right now. And I would like to specifically thank Minister Reshetnikov for his remarkable efforts in the process of legislation development when it comes to climate change mitigation and adaptation. I would like to give our next word to our next speaker, Mr. Mikhail Chudakov, Deputy Director General and Head of the Department of Nuclear Energy at the International Atomic Energy Agency. Mr. Chudakov, the question I have for you would be that your agency has been very active in promoting nuclear energy as a crucial element of low emissions and sustainable energy mix of the future. How would you describe nuclear energy's position vis-a-vis other energy sources when it comes to sustainability?
Thank you, Andrei. Dear friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon. As you know, the world is at a turning point when it comes to energy production, climate change and sustainable development. As if we needed a reminder, just this May, A report by the International Meteorological Organization said it is becoming very likely that the world will breach the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold sometime in the next 5 years. In other words, the clock is ticking. At the same time, more than 700 million people lack access to electricity and are desperate to achieve higher living standards, which no one has a right to deny them. We are facing a double challenge. Electricity demand is increasing at a time of increased gas emissions and rising global temperatures. Nuclear power has a unique potential to address both the issue of increased electricity demand and climate change. As you know, nuclear power produces virtually no greenhouse gas emission during its life cycle. It is a proven technology. It steadily and reliably supplies large amounts of energy. Having nuclear energy as part of a country's energy mix tends to lower energy systems' overall costs due to its dispatchability and the high capacity factors. Nuclear power plants need less land per unit of energy than other low-carbon technology. It is one of the densest and most concentrated energy sources. We should also not forget the important role nuclear power program has in stimulating job growth. By 2050, global final energy consumption is projected to increase by about 30%, and electricity production is expected to double. As a proven, scalable, and low-carbon energy source and a reliable partner for intermittent renewable sources, nuclear power is part of the solution to climate change. The IES calculations show that nuclear power is estimated to have avoided already about 78 gigaton of CO2 emissions in the past 50 years. It already plays a significant role in helping climate change mitigation and can play a vital role in achieving global carbon neutrality by 2050 and meeting the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. This is the messages that IEA highlights in various forums. In 2019, we organized our first ever international conference on this topic. The conference was attended by some 550 participants, represented 79 countries and 18 international organizations, including the head of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The main message of the conference is that the full value of nuclear power, the only energy source along with hydropower that has demonstrated the capability to decarbonize electricity production on a national scale, needs to be fully recognized if the world is to tackle the climate crisis. That was our message at the latest UN Climate Change Conference on COP25 held in Madrid, and we will reiterate it at COP26 in Glasgow this year. Nuclear power, unique ability to deliver clean electricity 24/7, but also flexibly as the demand fluctuates, is becoming more and more recognized worldwide. Hybrid energy system incorporating nuclear and renewables, as well as efforts to support the near-term deployment of advanced reactor technologies, such as small modular reactors, are also an important part of our focus. Non-electric applications of nuclear power have great potential to help decarbonize a wide range of industrial activities, from hydrogen production to seawater desalination. Under the leadership of Director General Grossi, we are insisting that nuclear power has a seat at the table where energy solutions for the climate crisis are discussed. The COVID crisis has shown that nuclear power is resilient and competitive. A combination of renewables and nuclear electricity operating in some 32 countries offered a glimpse of what a resilient low-carbon electricity system could be like in the future. About 30 countries are considering planning or actively working to include nuclear power in their energy mix. Newcomers countries that want to develop nuclear programs must have access to finance and affordable nuclear technologies. Here, we need to ensure that there is a level playing field for investments for all low-carbon technologies. This is true particularly for countries rolling out new nuclear power programs as part of their energy diversification and climate change mitigation strategies. Governments also need to ensure that electricity markets are designed to value the services that nuclear power can bring in terms of avoided emissions, security of supply, resilience, and flexibility. As I said previously, nuclear can support climate mitigation, but for this to happen, nuclear must remain part of the conversation today. governments need to articulate a clear and solid energy policy, and favorable framework for investment in nuclear must be developed and implemented. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chudakov. This is sounds exceptionally promising and promises, I would say, bright future for the nuclear power. Fortunately, we do have another speaker who's representative of the industry. This is I'd like to introduce Mr. Kirill Kamarov, first Deputy Director General for Corporate Development and International Business at Rosatom, Russian Nuclear Corporation. Happy to see you here, Mr. Kamarov. My question to you, elaborating on what Mr. Chudakov have been talking about in his intervention, question two would be the following. Rosatom is a global provider of nuclear energy. You have a lot of projects overseas, and you're known for your safety and security. In this regard, like, what is the role of nuclear tech in a low emissions future, but not only in terms of energy per se, but beyond that? How do you see that? Please.
Thank you very much for your question. Good afternoon to everybody, and it's a big pleasure for me to have an opportunity to take part in this very important and interesting event. Can we move to next page? Thank you. First of all, there is an explosive growth of power consumption in the world now. By 2040, demand for electric power will increase by almost 1/3. Together with this, all countries have taken obligations to reduce CO2 according to the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, more than 60 countries, including EU and Japan, have committed to reach carbon neutrality within next 30 years. World electricity sector is responsible for about 25% of all global CO2 emissions. So we need to focus on low carbon energy solution. Now there exist 4 low carbon sources of energy, which are hydro, wind, solar, and definitely nuclear. Of course, every country chooses its unique combination of these carbon-free technologies, considering its geographical specifics, existing energy mix, structure, economy, and social challenges. As for the place of nuclear power in the clean energy future, all operating nuclear power plants in the world help to save 2 billion CO2 emissions annually. That is almost the same amount which absorb all forests on the planet. Also, nuclear power plants guarantee stable energy supply, 24 hours, 7 days a week. It creates jobs, help to develop infrastructure, and to support developing local industries. Next page, please. We understand the request of international society to prove safety and security of nuclear technologies with regards to ecosystems and human health. Currently, we have an independent report of Joint Research Center of European Commission, which states that nuclear energy does not more harm to human health or the environment than any other power-producing technology considered to be sustainable. And we in Rosatom are always open to provide any additional information to ensure people that our technologies are green and safe. We also need to keep in mind that long-term net zero economic requires innovations and high-tech solutions. Rosatom is ready to answer for this request, as nuclear technologies imply thoughtful scientific basis and R&D. Last decades, all global nuclear communities focused on developing closed fuel cycle technologies, which we call fourth generations of reactors. Rosatom is a leader in this field with so-called MOX fuel and fast neutron reactors. And I'm happy to mention that last month we started the construction of Brest fast reactor. That means that by 2030, we will turn this closed fuel cycle technology into commercial use. Next page, please. I also would like to mention that Rosatom's strategy includes developing a wide range of green energy solutions. Today, Rosatom operates the biggest wind farm fleet in Russia with total capacity of more than 0.5 gigawatt. We also work on energy storage solutions and digital technologies to increase energy efficiency. Our another strategic focus is hydrogen, as we believe that is one of the most promising energy solutions of the future. In this way, we understand that the strategic concern on the climate issues is so high that we need to engage all our low carbon solutions and innovations to reach climate goals, as in our country as well as globally. And we need to unite all our efforts with other countries and companies to succeed in this challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Komarov. This is really impressive. I would like to specifically emphasize your commitment to transparency when it comes to safety of nuclear, and this is, I would say, absolutely crucial to establishment of a confirmation of nuclear as the green energy source, and specifically in hydrogen. I would say we will have another speaker today, and I hope to have a little debate on that. That would be absolutely marvelous to have. Moving on, I would like to introduce our next speaker, His Excellency Mr. Dai Bing, Ambassador, Charge d'Affaires and DPR of the Chinese mission to the United Nations. Ambassador Dai Bing. My question to you would be the following. China has set some very ambitious targets for climate. You expect to reach climate neutrality by 2060 and peak emissions at 2030. This is truly remarkable, especially for the economy of your size and your pace of growth. In this context, how does China view the energy transition, both nationally and globally? Ambassador Dai Bing, I think you're on mute right now.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for your question. I tried to answer. Dear colleagues and dear friends, I thank Russia for initiating today's online meeting. 2021 is a crucial year for the global environmental governance. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us once again that humanity and nature are a community of life. We must uphold multilateralism, strengthen solidarity and cooperation, and jointly tackle global challenges such as climate change, environmental pollution, and biodiversity loss to realize green, low carbon, and sustainable development. China sets great store by implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and vigorously advances its ecological conservation work, regarding lucid waters and lush mountains as invaluable assets. My President Xi Jinping announced at the high-level meeting of 75th session of the UN General Assembly and the Leaders' Summit on Climate that China will strive to achieve carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060, demonstrating China's firm commitment to actively addressing climate change and realizing green development. We remain committed to the people-centered approach. We see a sound ecological environment as the most inclusive well-being of people and work relentlessly to keep our skies blue, our waters clean, and our lands pollution-free, so as to meet people's growing aspiration for a beautiful ecological environment. We actively advance the revolution in energy protection and consumption, constantly upgrade industry and energy structures, and accelerate the development of energy conserving, environmentally friendly industries. For many years, China's renewable energy sector has consistently ranked first in the world in patents, investment, installed capacity, and power generation. Now, the wind power and photovoltaic installations account for more than 30% of the global total, and the new energy vehicles, 55% 55% of the global sales. Between 2016 and 2020, China saw a significant drop in its energy intensity and equivalent of slashing 1.4 billion tons of the CO2 emission. We actively conduct South-South cooperation since 2011. China has allocated 1.2 billion RMB of assistance to support least developed countries and small island states in meeting the challenges of climate change. We have made environmental and ecological cooperation a key part of Belt and Road Initiative. In recent years, China has invested an average of more than $2 billion in renewable energy projects in the Belt and Road Initiative. In October, China will hold COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity and the second United Nations Global Sustainable Transport Conference. China stands ready to strengthen cooperation with all parties and work for positive outcomes of these two international meetings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Daibing. This is really nice and promising to hear, especially your remarks on the achievements of the People's Republic of China and your ambitious targets for 2030 and 2060. I would like to introduce our next speaker, His Excellency Mr. Kimura Tetsuya, Ambassador Economics, Social and United Nations Management Affairs, Japan. Ambassador Tetsuya, pleased to see you once again. I'd like to ask you this. Japan has always been a supporter of an efficient, economically viable, yet sustainable energy mix. You've been really known for that as a country, and I assume you continue to stress this for the international arena. Now, how do you see the necessary changes in the global climate regulation landscape that will allow us to reduce emissions and achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, while making sure that we as an international community do not discriminate unfairly against energy sources and technologies? Please.
Thank you, Vice President Mr. Andre Baida. Distinguished participants, at the outset, I would like to appreciate the Ministry of Economic Development, the Russian Federation, and the State Atomic Energy Corporation, Rosatom, for organizing this meaningful side event. Accelerating implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement is the critical important for all. The question posed by Andre is best answered against the backdrop of the HLPF 2021, the theme of which is sustainable and resilient recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed us to unprecedented challenges of a multidimensional nature. It continues to threaten the survival, livelihood, and dignity of individuals around the world and has caused serious setbacks in our progress to achieve the SDGs in the area of poverty, hunger, health, education, gender equality, and others. As both SDG 7 and 13 are closely interlinked with the other SDGs, just as COVID-19 is, the approaches we take to energy and climate-related challenges should be comprehensive and context-specific, putting people at the center of our actions. The international community needs to bring tangible improvement to people's daily lives, which have been harmed due to COVID-19. This situation requires a global framework which can galvanize the engagement of all relevant stakeholders on the ground and break down silos across sectors and institutions. At the same time, since the geographic and socio-economic conditions for energy vary significantly across and within countries, it is also necessary to consider utilizing diversified energy resources in a well-balanced manner, fitting into national circumstances with the widest variety of technology and fuels, including liquefied natural gas and nuclear energy in order to achieve SDGs 7 and 13 overall. Whether these SDGs can be achieved relies heavily on our actions. We need to focus on further stimulating and enhancing partnership among all stakeholders, such as government, the private sector, and civil society. To be more specific, I would like to share some examples of such partnerships, both in the domestic policy and foreign assistance of Japan. First, in the area of domestic policy, the government of Japan has developed its green growth strategies, which is Japan's industrial policy in the spirit of a positive cycle of economic growth and environmental protection. The strategy aims to support and motivate the private sector to make bold investment and innovations with a concrete national vision and goals presented by the government. The strategy sets targets in 14 priority areas, such as offshore wind power, hydrogen, storage batteries, and carbon recycling, and also establishes a fund of approximately $20 billion for ambitious research and development projects over the next 10 years. Second, in the area of foreign assistance, the off-grid solar power project is a public-private initiative to improve energy access in sub-Saharan Africa, being carried out by some Japanese startup company. This company installs solar panels at retail shops in villages without electricity and provides services such as LED lamp and mobile phone charging dock rentals for bottom of the pyramid customers in Tanzania and other parts of East Africa. With Japan's official development assistance, the initiative has provided electricity to 1.5 million people in more than 1,000 locations in Tanzania. Such initiative shows that universal energy access should consider various ways to combine various energy sources and technologies according to the circumstances of each country and local area. On climate finance, which is a vital driver of the implementation of the Paris Agreement, Japan announced at the G7 Cornwall Summit that it would provide climate finance, both public and private, totaling 6.5 trillion Japanese yen, equivalent to approximately $60 billion at the current rate from 2021 to 2025. In the spirit of international solidarity, Japan will continue to lead and contribute to universal energy access and a global transition to a decarbonized world. Looking ahead to COP26 and beyond, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Kimura. This is a very comprehensive list of actions that I'm sure will contribute to global fight against climate change. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Her Excellency Dame Barbara Woodward, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the UK Mission to the United Nations in New York. Madam Ambassador, my question to you would be is that there is a lot of anticipation in the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow, and I'm sure that the preparations are right there at the front of your mind. Does the British presidency have a particular approach to the technological side of the global climate discussion that is underway?
Well, thank you very much indeed. And can I start by welcoming Russia's support for international cooperation in tackling climate change, and also to thank you for the warm welcome that the COP president-designate received during his visit to Moscow last month. May I start with a personal reflection? Because when I lived in Russia in the 1990s, I had the opportunity to see Russia's energy and power sector at first hand. And that is to say, I went down a coal mine in Russia, a mile underground, and I went to the Arctic Circle, to the Black Sea, to Sakhalin in the Far East, and to Tyumen in Siberia, at the heart of Russia's oil production. And I saw the jobs and the power that are involved in the energy sector, but also, of course, the pollution of some of Russia's most beautiful landscapes. Now, things will have changed a lot since then, in that 30 years. But as the world's fourth largest emitter and a permanent member of the Security Council, Russia is such an essential player in this debate. So the issues of energy transition and sustainable recovery, and indeed technology, are, as you say, right at the heart of our planning for COP26, which is, as you say, right at the forefront of our minds just now. May I emphasize 4 aspects of our planning here? The first is pace, where technology has a really important role, because the IAEA the International Energy Agency and the International Renewable Energy Agency have made clear that to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, the global transition to clean power needs to move some 4 to 6 times faster than the current pace, and technology will be really important here. The second thing I want to emphasize is, of course, the importance that each country should have the flexibility to determine their own energy mix in line with delivering the Paris Agreement goals. And we all have a part to play in the transition to clean, affordable, resilient power for all. And that, of course, includes, as we all know, setting phase-out dates for coal power, reforming power markets so that sources of clean power like solar and wind can compete effectively against coal and gas. So this is a point, I think, about technology and market pricing. The third point is about finance. We know, and it's at the forefront of our minds as we prepare for Glasgow, that energy transition must be underpinned by finance. So we are encouraging countries which are in a position to contribute financial and technical assistance to support developing countries planning and developing clean power systems, designing effective policies and mobilizing private investment. So finance is about access to technology for all. And the final point is that we think it's critically important that all the major economies lead by example. And that's why we're urging all the G20 economies to join the movement to reach net zero emissions by mid-century. And that will be critical to limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade. So I thank you for your question. I agree that technology is very important, and I hope that gives you a sense of how we're mainstreaming it in our preparations for Glasgow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. I was specifically pleased to hear your position on technological neutrality when it comes to decarbonization of the energy sector. This is really promising to hear for all the countries represented here in this panel, and I'm absolutely convinced that COP26 in Glasgow would be an absolute success. Moving to our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Dr. Plinio Nastari, the president of the Brazilian Institute of Bioenergy and Bioeconomy. Dr. Nastari, my question to you would be, Brazil is a key player in the global dialogue on climate regulation, and particularly on the energy side of things. Biofuel often seems to be forgotten piece of the puzzle. It has been discussed fairly recently, but then it kind of slipped away from the agenda. What are the ways to make it more visible in the global discussion? How can this energy source be scaled up to meet the climate challenge?
Thank you very much, Mr. Biden, and thank you for inviting Brazil to participate in this discussion led by the Russian Federation. And I greet all the other speakers and participants of this meeting. Thank you for your question. Biofuels and ethanol and biomethane in particular are proven as excellent sources of energy in transport for the transition to a more sustainable environment. Why? And why are they so important? Well, in the world, greenhouse gas emissions coming from generation and use of energy, 23% come from transport. But in many countries like Brazil, it's much more than that. In Brazil, it's 43%. Countries that have lower industrialization, big agricultural sector needing transport. We have found over the years that biofuels and ethanol in particular is a replicable solution. There's no technological barrier for its implementation. They are scalable. They can grow over time as a blend component to gasoline, enabling high octane fuels used in more efficient, smaller engines and in flex fuel technologies. They are drop-in. They use the existing infrastructure and can be implemented immediately and save investments in building up new infrastructure. Biofuels allow automakers to meet the most rigorous emission limits under the well-to-wheel criteria or life cycle assessment. Internal combustion engines using ethanol emit only 58 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilometer. Hybrids using ethanol emit 29 grams, while electric battery cars emit 92. Gasoline vehicles emit 145 grams. Biofuels are safe to handle. They create jobs. They use local resources. They reduce energy dependence. They reduce local pollution in cities. And for that matter, Brazil is currently substituting 47% of its gasoline with ethanol, and until 2030 aims to substitute 55%. Sustainable biofuels such as ethanol and biomethane are therefore at the center of Brazil's strategy to meet its commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement. New technologies are being developed for more efficient ethanol use, such as optimized internal combustion engines using high-octane fuels, hybrids, and electrification with biofuels using fuel cells. And biomethane from organic residues will grow considerably in use along with ethanol. Both ethanol and biomethane can be understood as solar energy, or actually hydrogen, that is efficient, economical, and safe to capture, store, and distribute. And Brazil actually has already installed a network of hydrogen distribution through 42,000 pump stations spread in a continental country distributing ethanol and soon biomethane. Brazil is an open showcase for many countries that have similar condition and aptitude to produce sustainable, certified, carbon and completely deforestation-free biofuels through proper regulation such as RenovaBio. To scale it up, we need to break the barriers of misconception, the gaps of information, and promote sustainable production of biofuels, preserving the use of natural resources such as land and water. Thank you very much.
Dr. Nastari, thank you so much. It was really interesting to know about the role of biofuel in the job creation, which once again reflects and fosters commitments on other SDGs, which is remarkable. And thank you so much once again for your intervention. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Philippe Joubert, Senior Advisor, World Economic Council and former President of Alstom Energy. Mr. Joubert. Question to you would be, there seems to be a certain disconnect between how many of us want the energy mix of the climate-friendly future to look like, and what seems to be feasible in terms of the economic viability and efficiency. How do we bridge this gap, and how do we accommodate for the diversity of national circumstances while delivering on the Paris Agreement goals and global emissions target?
Thank you. Thank you, Andre. Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting us. Before anything, we should acknowledge, and this is what we do in the World Energy Council, that we are reaching the planet boundaries. So there should be a kind of urgency in our discussion. In other hand, we know that energy is not really about energy, it's about development. And so we need to decouple in reality abusing natural capital and developing what needs to be developed. As it has been remembered, we have still a lot of hundreds of millions of people without access to real energy. At the World Energy Council, we think that any solution of energy, to answer directly your question, should respect what we call the trilemma, which is there is no sustainable, so long-term solution in energy if we don't respect first the security of supply, which is generally considered at the country level and with part of the security policy of each country. So there is no solution if we don't respect this specificity. The second thing is the equity, allowing safe and fair development. So it's about cost, affordability, long-term. And here, the message that we send is we are talking true cost, not apparent cost. And this is a very important issue that we should consider in order not to increase what we call the stranded asset or to go into routes that are without a related solution. And thirdly, we talk about environmental friendly. So this is about greenhouse gas for sure, but not only. This is also about water and land, as it has been reminded just before me, and other rare resources. And above all, we need to understand that we are already disrupting the system. So we need to have resilient solution because the new world that we are entering in is already perturbated. So on top of that, as it has been said before me, more energy is needed. So the magnitude of the issue that we are in front of is much bigger than what we have done till now. So new solutions are absolutely necessary. We normally speak when it comes to electricity about the 4D, which is the decarbonization, which is a shortcut for environmental friendly, the digitalization, which is the only way to be efficient, and more importantly, to be demand side friendly, demand response friendly, that we have not yet taken the magnitude of the solution. And we are talking about decentralized. Paradoxically, we think that decentralized should means also interconnection. And I will come back to this in a second. And the system should be immune to disruption because, as we say, both the model and the production should be resilient. In conclusion, we think that there is no silver bullet. We are technology agnostic. We also know that there is no such thing as one size fits all. We think that integration is a key word, both at the regional level or at the sub-regional level, because this is the only way we can have the scale to address the issue that we are now confronting to. And never forget that interconnection is probably the best storage that we have available. And we can also increase the resilience of the system with interconnection. And finally, with the new Secretary General, we are implementing a strategy around what we call humanizing transition, because we think that technology is a mean, is not a goal, but the human should be at the center of the strategy. And in any transition, And as a former CEO, I know what I'm talking about. In any transition, you have winner and loser. And we have to take care of the loser. If not, the resistance will be such that we will not have time to implement the solution before it's too late. And by the way, never forget that intergenerational should be part of this dialogue. We are always talking about diversity, and we still forget that the most important diversity is intergenerational. And just to conclude, the energy is nothing without use. So in our conversation, the user should be present. That's why in the World Energy Council, we always talk about the energy plus community, which include who is using energy also. Thank you for your question.
Mr. Jabet, thank you so much for your intervention. I'd like to specifically emphasize one point from what you just said about the inclusion and about the fact that no one should be left behind, and what you call the losers of the energy transition should be helped by the broad international community and brought up to speed. So thank you so much for these remarks. Let me introduce our final speaker. This is Mr. Mark Barnaba, Deputy Chairman for Tesk Metals Group. Mr. Barnaba, my question to you would be the following. For Tesk Metals Group is one of the top iron ore producers and exporters in the world. The company has taken a vow to be completely carbon neutral by 2030, which is remarkable for a company of your industry and for the company of your sheer scale and magnitude. And you already have begun the process of this transition. Now, as we start to fathom the complexity of the energy transitions that have to happen, and if we want to have both economic growth and lower emissions, we start looking around for different silver bullets. Some might believe that hydrogen may be one of them. Do you think hydrogen is the silver bullet that can fix everything? What is the optimal division of labor between governments and private sector in order to make sure that the energy transition works?
Good. Well, thank you, Andre. Thank you, Rush, for initiating this roundtable. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all my colleagues around the world. Let me say what a great pleasure it is to be here speaking at this event. Let me begin by just giving a very quick snapshot of Fortescue Metals Group. We are a mining and energy company. We're one of the largest miners in the world. We have a market capitalization of around US $60 billion. If you look at broker estimates, they would say that we are on track this financial year to generate profit in the vicinity of net profit after tax of around US $10 billion. We were founded 18 years ago in 2003 by Dr. Andrew Forrest. He still is our chairman. He owns just over 35% of the company. We produce just under 200 million tonnes of iron ore annually. We are one of the lowest cost producers in the industry. So that is Fortescue. Let me actually then turn to what we are doing to decarbonise Fortescue's operations. Fortescue and our 100% owned subsidiary, Fortescue Future Industries, as Andre said, this year announced Fortescue's target to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030, and that is 10 years earlier than our previous target, which was not set that long ago. By the end of this decade, all of our trucks will be run on renewable electricity, green energy. Ultimately, our entire fleet of ships, vehicles, trucks, trains will follow suit. We've already been successful in testing combustion of ammonia as a green locomotive fuel with a pathway to achieve a completely renewable fuel. We've already completed the design and construction of a combustion testing device for large ship engines with pilot test work underway and a pathway in place to achieve completely renewable green shipping fuel. And we've also finalised the design of a next generation ore carrier that will consume renewable green ammonia. Where does the hydrogen come from? We are fortunate that we are based in the northwest of Western Australia in an area called the Pilbara. It has an unusual abundance of wind and sun. We are currently planning large-scale wind and solar generated electricity and hydrogen projects that collectively will generate over 40 gigawatts of power. That's obviously more than enough for our own operations, with the view to also export renewable energy. We will have independent verification of our path to carbon neutrality. We've structured our internal management, incentive and remuneration system to be accountable for its delivery. So we are obviously taking this seriously and structuring our organisation to deliver on it. It is our view that renewable green hydrogen today is still virtually ignored by the economic and financial world. Our view is that we're missing quite a remarkable opportunity. The numbers that we see, the green hydrogen market could create revenues in excess of US 10 trillion by 2050, way more than virtually any other industry that exists today. So the question clearly becomes, why now? The commitment to decarbonising is clear. Electrification alone cannot deliver full decarbonisation. Sectors such as marine transport, heavy haulage, and industrial processes where hydrogen is a feedstock are now triggering, and we're seeing in the market, demand for green hydrogen, in particular green and brandable green hydrogen. Electrolysis, obviously needed to separate the hydrogen and the oxygen in water to produce the hydrogen, is now a proven technology, where deployment at scale is now beginning to drive down the cost of green hydrogen production. The flexibility of electrolysis to be coupled with intermittent renewables as a mechanism to store energy provides a solution for the medium to long-term duration. And this complements our belief that batteries are then suited for short duration storage. What are we doing at the moment? Well, Fortescue Future Industries is now studying and optimising a portfolio of hydropower, geothermal, wind and solar resources globally. We have sites targeted in Russia, in Central Asia, in North America, in South America. In South America, we already have an existing large operation, in Africa and the Asia Pacific region. Transport of hydrogen is often cited as a challenge to us. There are a number of ways to solve this based on generation, site and customer location. For large-scale export, conversion of green hydrogen to green ammonia to enable shipborne transport is actually a viable option already today. The technologies exist, and when the end-to-end process is powered from renewables, the green ammonia to zero emissions, we believe becomes a reality. The ammonia can then be consumed directly for energy generations. It can be used as a feedstock to decarbonise industries such as agriculture, or processed to realise the hydrogen at destination. Progress on liquid hydrogen as a route is accelerating through technology and R&D. And our view is that this will be a real and viable option in the future. We see it as the near future. Other options such as liquid organic hydrogen carriers are literally available today in their infancy, but they are available today. We know green energies need to be available at an industrial global scale and at a price, obviously, that competes in a commercial sense with fossil fuels to allow them to compete. When fossil fuel energy becomes more expensive than renewable energy, that's when we'll reach the tipping point. That's when the world will begin to journey in earnest to become zero carbon. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because commercially and from a business perspective, it simply makes good sense. We feel that this shift is happening now. Forget 2050, zero emissions is a journey that we are clearly on now and will occur much quicker than we believe the market has anticipated. let me conclude with that, and again, simply say thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barnaba. There was a remarkable intervention. Thank you, especially about the way you spoke about the I would say hardcore applications of very certain, very specific technologies in a very complex industry. Thank you so much for your intervention. I would like to move to the Q&A session. We do have a couple of questions, and I will summarize those and ask them to our remarkable panel of speakers. I think let's start with the following question. We've been discussing different technologies and that determine the green energy mix. And different applications of these technologies and the way different countries approach their energy mix composition. Are we missing anything? Are there any low carbon or zero carbon technologies that we don't know yet? Will there anything be up there on the horizon to work with? And are the existing low carbon and zero carbon technologies ready to scale? Would like to put this question forward to our panel speakers, and if anyone wants to answer, I'd love to hear the answer for that.
Mr. Baida, if you allow me, this is Plinio Nastari. I would like to start. I enjoyed also very much Mr. Barnaba's presentation, and I would like to say that in Brazil, we are also looking very much into green hydrogen because of the huge potential for wind and solar energy capture. And we see a great complementarity between green hydrogen and what we are doing with bioenergy, because bioenergy, as I said, can be understood as distributed generation of hydrogen, which is easy to distribute on a broad geographical area. Whereas green hydrogen have wonderful applications for industrial purposes, for production of ammonia, fertilizers, for production of a green gusa steel, other products, because it's easier to handle hydrogen on site. So we believe we are moving towards the age of hydrogen, yes, with clean energy that can be sourced from wind, from photovoltaic, from nuclear as well. I enjoyed also the Russian Federation's minister's speech saying that we should have no prejudice against sources of energy. Currently, there is very little debate about the safety of nuclear, and all these sources of energy should be understood as combining themselves. What my point about bioenergy is that there's a huge amount of resources available in many countries. They're ready to be tapped and be transformed into economical energy for use, which is not going to compete with food. On the contrary, it's going to leverage production of food as you increase capitalization in agriculture. And these sources of energy are also a low cost. So I think we are going to have a blend of green hydrogen based on clean energy, hydrogen, which is coming from this great source of hydrogen, which is biofuels because of their high hydrogen content. And this is what will lead, I think, the view of the transition into a cleaner environment. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nastari. I'd like to slightly incorporate on that and on Mr. Barnaba's point here, which I love the most, about the fact that carbon neutrality will happen when it will be economically viable. And yes, this is. I think this is a very important message that we need to take with us. I was also notified that Mr. Kamarov had a point to say, and then Mr. Barnab, I'll move to you.
Thank you very much, Andrei. I think when we talk about technologies, definitely everybody understands that it's impossible to stop the technological progress itself. That's why when you ask, do we have a whole range today for future technologies will be efficient, will give green energy, will be very good source for sustainable energy? Definitely not, because every day we have something new. And we have something new in technological development of existing technology. They are making themselves cheaper, they are making themselves safer. And it's what's open a lot of new opportunities how to implement this technology, how to use them. For example, if we develop successfully in next time period, for example, the energy storage solution, it will be a very interesting package for example, renewables, energy storage, and nuclear as a base for to cover the energy demand. And yes, I totally agree with our Brazilian colleagues that green hydrogen, it's a very interesting source of energy. Now it's also an expensive source. And yes, we still have a huge discussion how we define green and what can be defined as a green source, including altogether. But I think in all this area, we should stay on a very pragmatic, very, let me say, scientific position. And as I used as a comment for to explain why nuclear can be a very important part of this future green sustainable energy mix. It's a very clear statement from research point of view, from scientific point of view. And European Commission and Special Research Center said that it's now even single fact that nuclear it's more dangerous than other sustainable and green sources of energy. That's what we need to use, and definitely we need to continue to develop existing technology and look for new opportunities during this development. Thank you.
Mr. Kamarov, thank you so much. And I'd like to give the word to Mr. Barnaba. Mr. Barnaba, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bader. Look, I'm often reminded what it takes to actually establish a new market and a new industry, and that is what is being discussed here. How do we move from existing fuels to new fuels at scale and at economics which are sustainable and compelling? And I'm sure there are many factors, but there are at least 5 factors which we need to have happen simultaneously. The first is government and industry working together. This will not be solved only by government. It will not be solved only by industry. You effectively need the interaction and collective willpower of both. Secondly, you have to solve for both supply and demand. The demand for, say, green hydrogen and the supply of it. An example is our own operations. We use nearly 1 billion litres of diesel. If we produce green hydrogen at marginal cost of close to zero from solar and wind, we can be our own first customer. We can solve at least some of the demand issue whilst we tackle the supply issue. The third is technology. You need technologies, but you need them at scale. Electrolyzers. At the moment, the cost of electrolyzers probably has to decrease. And we're seeing it to about 1/3 to 1/2 of where they're at, from close to, say, US $1 million per megawatt hour to probably around $300,000 or $400,000. The fourth is one that many people on this call would know better than I do, and that is regulation and global momentum. The Paris Accord, having ESG as a metric to judge board of directors and private companies and public companies around the world. And the last is financing. We are seeing for the first time green bonds, sustainability linked bonds, especially in Europe, which has really been the most mature market in terms of green bonds and sustainability linked bonds. but we are seeing for the first time financing in ESG, green, and sustainability approaching US $1 trillion in financing. So those 5 factors, government and industry working together, solving both simultaneously supply and demand for the fuel, technology at scale, regulation and corporate will and financing. What we see is that those 5 factors are now in place for at least green hydrogen. Some more mature than others. So we are having to try and push some along, but they're happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barnaby. It was very interesting to kind of see how that intersects with Madam Ambassador Voivod's priorities for COP26, especially when it comes to financing and the role of financing in the entire mix of how to make technologies available. I see a hand from Mr. Chudakov, please.
Thank you, Andrei. If we are talking about the future energy, don't forget about the fusion. That international project ITER is promising to give in several years, in 25th, maybe in 26, a little bit delay, already to hold plasma more than 500 seconds. Plasma with more than 100 million degrees. And then to prove that it's happened, that already for the last 2 years, more than dozens, more than 20, close even to 40 private companies investing $2 billion in developing the new reactors on plasma, on fusion reactors. And we started also that recently, just started that our Director General Grossi declared that start feasibility study for the demo for the first commercial reactors that probably comes in, of course, in 20, 30 years, but the second half of the century, probably we will get already the commercial reactors and energy of sun, unlimited energy and clean energy. That's what expecting in the future. And now, by the way, I have that in parallel on another screen that the International Fusion Research Council, where I am going to close it in after closing our meeting, that and I can see their presentation and can see a great progress in the world also on fusion. So this is also that clean sun energy, unlimited source of energy. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chudakov. This is remarkable how new technologies arise, like within years of research, and then suddenly it comes to a commercial application and starts being something that could be used for large scale and scalable, once again, and energy production. This is remarkable to hear. I'd like to move to 2 very specific questions that I saw in the chat. First one would be to Dr. Nastari. The question would be about how do you rapidly scale and convert large fleets of cars in a country to biofuels, and how Brazil's example could be used around the world.
Certainly, thank you. Currently, all fleets around the world can use 10% ethanol blends with no problem. And with a few adaptation, this blend ratio can go up to 20 to 25%, taking care of some material compatibility issues and coating, which is what, for instance, India is doing. India has anticipated its blend ratio mandate of 20% from 2030 to 2023. They are this year already blending 8.5%, going to 10% next year, and to 20% in 23. Let's recall Brazil is using 27% blend, and Brazil also has a fleet of flex cars which can use either gasohol, E27, or pure ethanol, which account for 86% of total fleet, which is also a direction India is going, as they are now drafting regulation to allow flex fuel technology into India. We believe that other countries are going to follow the same path. Volkswagen in Germany has approved this past week that the World Research Center for Development and Improvement of this technology will be in Brazil. And they are aiming at having this technology to disseminate to other parts of the world. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nastari. And another very specific question about a particular technology that I'd like to address to Mr. Chudakov and Mr. Kamarov. It's about the question that while nuclear power plants have the highest power density per area and time of operation and are reliable, the question is, how do you scale them up? Because it takes a lot of time to build one. And are there any technologies that speed up the construction of nuclear power plants?
Who will start? Kirill Borisovich? Or me?
I think it would be you, Mr. Chudakov.
Okay. So that you are absolutely right that now the construction is takes from the beginning, from the first concrete, that it takes maybe several years. But the absolute record, this is Belarus. Belarus is 6 years. 6 years of construction. That other than 9 years, and of course we have examples as Altil water that already 12 or 14 years. I already forgot that. So there is a specific reasons for this, and of course, for the expedite the development of nuclear power, we need a clear policy of and support of government, and also access to the finances. And this is you are right. This is the problem, because no one private bank will give the money if they are going to receive back in 20, 30 years. It's a difficulty. So we need that. That's why we can see that construction mainly in Russia and then in China, where there is a governmental investment in the construction and governmental credits for this. In other countries, we have some problems, but we need to calculate all pros and cons, and for the nuclear, and also that the government support for sure, that it should be stakeholder support and good infrastructure, and the existing capacity of industry allows to increase, of course, that development of nuclear power. And also one project that if you are not modernized, always change the project, that when you scale, it's easily to scale when you construct the same units. And also that small modular reactors that allow to use that industry, that not so powerful industry to produce it, and also to scale it in the big scale, and that this is a future also for the small modular reactors. But for this, of course, it should be, as I already mentioned, that should be governmental support and stakeholder support and the access to the finances. That's how it can be done.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chudakov. I think we'll have to be wrapping up shortly, and I'd like to point at least like 3 takeaways that I personally had from this panel discussion, which I found remarkably interesting. First one was the fact that there's no one right solution for the zero carbon or low carbon energy mix. It seems like different technologies should be taken into account in every country and the circumstances of in which these particular economies operate. Number 2 is the role of finance and availability of finance for the green technologies, or the zero or low carbon technologies, paired together with economic viability, meaning that these new energy sources should, due to R&D, reach such levels that they could be scalable and be cheaper than using fossil fuels. And I think the third thing that is as they say, last but not least, no one should be left behind. No country and no technology should be disregarded, and non-discriminatory manner upon which countries should approach the technological mix is something that should be kept in mind. I would like to once again thank our remarkable speakers for joining us today. It was a pleasure. It was very interesting to hear from all of you, from people from all around the world, from member states, from academia, from the businesses. Once again, thank you so much for joining, and have a good evening.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise, thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Andre.
you.
Bye.